Hello, I'm Jenny Joyce, and today I'm going to talk to you about 10 things that you are probably doing wrong with your family history research. It isn't just beginners who do things wrong when researching their trees. Even the most experienced genealogists can and do sometimes fall into the trap of making mistakes. And there are some very experienced people I know who are making at least one of these. Here are 10 mistakes that you may well be making in your genealogical research. Not checking the help for online searches. We all want to jump straight in and start searching when we get access to something new, but a bit of time spent looking at the search help can really pay dividends. Among other things, the help sections tell you how to search on that particular site, because there are variations from site to site. An example is Discovery, the catalogue of the National Archives of the UK. Their help, accessed from the top of the search screen, can tell you about the use of and, or, not, and wildcards. Wildcards are special symbols that you can use in your search. In this case, the asterisk or star will match 0 or more characters, and a question mark will match exactly 1 character. We also learn that Discovery will search for derivatives of keywords unless you place the word in speech marks. An example is that a search for marine will also match mariner. Hopefully you've heard of Trove, a specialist search engine provided by the National Archives of Australia, which allows you to search newspapers amongst other things. The help on that site includes advice on searching for MUC surnames, that is MC or MAC, which can be quite complicated, and on searching for terms containing punctuation. There's more of interest in the help sections on both of these sites, so go and have a look at them and check the help on other sites too. Not using the advanced search. Again, I understand the temptation to jump straight in and start searching, and maybe that's okay sometimes, but other times you'll get much better results by using an advanced search. An advanced search will help teach you how to craft better queries for yourself. On some sites, if you search for Henry Wenban without quotes, you will get results that include the word Henry and the word Wenban anywhere on that record. But with the British Newspaper Archive, as just one example, it will return any papers that have Henry or Wenban anywhere in them. By using the advanced search and entering the 2 words Henry Wenban in the search all words field, you only get results that have both the word Henry and the word Wenban in them. And you can also see that the resulting search has a plus symbol before each word. So that is the way on the British Newspaper Archive to state that the results must include that term. Advanced search can also be time-saving when querying lots of results, as they often let you narrow down the dates you're searching, or in the case of the National Archives, to limit the results of your search to a particular record series. If I want to find the World War I war diaries for the Royal Army Medical Corps, and I search for Royal Army Medical Corps, I get almost 200,000 results. Now, I'm certainly not going to look through all of those to find the war diaries. But if I do an advanced search and put WO95, which is the record series for the war diaries, I get 17 results, all war diaries for different date ranges and different theatres of war. And I can easily find that the war diaries for the Royal Army Medical Corps at Gallipoli are in WO95/4275. Not reading the research guides. Most, but not all archives have research guides on their websites, and I can't stress how valuable they can be. I used the research guide on the British Army War Diaries 1914 to 1922 to find that record series WO95 that I just mentioned. The research guide on police tells us that Only the records of the Metropolitan Police, the Royal Irish Constabulary and Transport Police are held at the National Archives. For any other police force, you'll have to look elsewhere. Most, if not all, of the National Archives research guides give you links to whatever is available online for the subject of the guide. National Archives of Ireland has useful guides on Irish convicts, the Great Famine, the registered papers of the Chief Secretary's Office, other sources for Irish family history, and many, many more things. West Sussex Archive Guide to Censuses lists all the pre-1841 census records that they have, which isn't a huge number, but if it's for the parish that you're looking at, then this will be a gold mine. Public Record Office of Northern Ireland has one thing that you should look at, even if you're not interested in Northern Ireland: a guide on Latin terminology in Roman Catholic registers. I've put together a list of just some of the sites with useful guides in the syllabus for this talk, which you can access from the RootsTech website. Not checking the dates of a data set. Most records we use in family history apply only to certain dates. Therefore, it's a waste of time to look for records or events that occur outside those dates. It's not possible to find a birth certificate for somebody born in England in 1835 because civil registration just didn't begin there until the 1st of July 1837. Similarly, you won't find a New South Wales death certificate to find a cause of death before 1856. And believe it or not, I have seen people checking the 1828 census of New South Wales for a family that they know didn't arrive until the 1830s. Less obvious are parish registers or bishops' transcripts that have gaps. Look at this example from Hawkesbury in Gloucestershire. Baptisms, marriages and burials are not included in the parish register for the period 1623 to 1625 and 1642 to 1644, so there's no point in looking for them. But it's also important to bear in mind that if your ancestor was having children around about this period, they might have had some children that you don't know about due to the gaps in the register. Not seeking proof yourself. We all know the dangers of blindly accepting the work of others or accepting those ancestry shaky leaf hints without first checking the facts yourself. Look at these examples of a person who appeared in the 1851 census having died in 1848 and a stillborn baby fathering children. But it's okay to trust published books, right? Especially those from the 19th century written by noted authors? No. This is part of a family as put together during the visitation by the heralds from the College of Arms during 1564 and 1585. Arthur signed this off as correct. This chart is important because Catherine Tempest is a gateway ancestor. She is descended from King Edward III, and therefore all her descendants can also claim King Edward as an ancestor. Nearly 3 centuries later, more generations were grafted onto this tree. Why this interests me is that John of Alverthorpe and John of Stainland are my direct ancestors. But, and it's a big but, there are problems here. I don't have time in this presentation to go to the process by which we proved this, but this Christopher isn't Christopher of Hollinghall, nor is this Christopher, nor the real Christopher of Hollinghall, the father of John of Stainland. This incorrect chart was first, as far as I can discover, printed by John Burke, the original publisher of Burke's Peerage, in 1835. It was then repeated in other noted publications. But once something is in print, it keeps being found and the errors persist. This is the family of the correct Christopher. So what about my ancestor, John of Stainland? Well, we still don't know who his father was, and that means I don't need to rush out to buy a tiara. And it also means that you shouldn't take any prior work for granted without checking and double checking it for yourself. not reading the introductions to books. I know the introduction to some books can look very dry and boring, and we just want to jump straight in and start searching for information about our ancestors. But it is important to read those introductions, as they contain vital information, or can contain vital information, to help you interpret what you find inside. I'll give you a couple of examples. Shipping arrivals and departures, Sydney 1788 to 1825, states that the list has been compiled entirely from contemporary sources, which are set out in the introduction. No single source gives a complete record, and errors appear in all sources. So the introduction then goes on to discuss those sources and makes it clear that there may be some missing vessels. It also makes some attempt to explain why there are possible reasons for some of those inconsistencies. Ships deserters, 1852 to 1900, lists people known to have deserted ship in the Australian colonies. You get lots of people who say, my ancestor jumped ship. But it's based on information published in the New South Wales Government Gazette and the New South Wales Police Gazette. Despite containing about 10,000 deserters, there were countless others that are not included in this book because their details were not published in those two sources. Musters of New South Wales and Norfolk Island 1805 to 1806 tells us about the date each of the musters took place, and also goes into great detail about Samuel Marsden's female muster of 1806, which is one of those included in this book. It's not a separate muster, but appears to have been based on information extracted from the general muster of that year. Now, Marsden was an intolerant man who seemed to have set out to document the levels of immorality in the female population in the colony at the time. A large proportion of the convict or ex-convict women he labelled as concubines, though it's unlikely that all unmarried women assigned to a male master were involved with them in that way. Bearing this in mind helps us to interpret the lists in this book. Not checking jurisdictions and border changes. Did you know that it wasn't until after the First World War that the Italy we know today was formed? That was when the area in the north of Italy were annexed from the defeated Austro-Hungarian Empire. Before 1861, there was no Italy. The Italian peninsula comprised several independent kingdoms and city-states. Veneto, the region containing Venice, was only added to Italy in 1866 after the Austro-Prussian War. So the final formation of the modern Italy didn't happen until the 20th century. But why does that matter? Because it affects what records might have been created and where they are located. Turning to Australia, Victoria only became a separate colony in 1851 and Queensland in 1859. Before then, they were both parts of New South Wales. So some records relating to these states are held in New South Wales, though many have been transferred to the relevant state. The image you can see here shows not only the creation of each state, but how the states of New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia have changed with regards to how much land they occupy. In England, a major reorganisation of the counties took place in 1974. Just to give a couple of examples, large swathes of Lancashire were given to the newly formed Cumbria, though Lancashire did gain some areas from Yorkshire, and the county of Rutland was disappeared altogether. There have subsequently been many more changes, though none as dramatic. All this is important to guide you to know where to look for the records. Another type of jurisdiction you need to be aware of are probate jurisdictions. Philemore's Atlas shows them for all counties of England, Scotland and Wales. And Brian Mitchell's A New Genealogical Atlas of Ireland shows them for that country. These are important because they don't correspond to county boundaries. So, make sure you check the boundaries of each jurisdiction and look for changes in those boundaries over time. Not killing off your ancestors. I know this sounds a bit gruesome, but I'm not advocating digging up the dead and killing them all over again. Nor am I saying that you should do away with any parents or grandparents that you may have now living. Instead, what I mean is that you have to find the death of each of your ancestors, and I'll give you an example why. Now, if you've been doing family history for a while, you'll remember the old IGI, the International Genealogical Index, which was the forerunner of FamilySearch. You'll also remember that the only records from parish registers that it included were baptisms and marriages, no deaths or burials. Now, the IGI was intended only as an index, and it was intended to be only a finding aid. The idea was that you would then consult the parish register to which it referred. But many of us, myself included, didn't always do that, or couldn't always have time to go through those old parish registers page by page. And for a novice, some of the very early entries, they'd have had trouble reading because of the difficult handwriting. So as a result, everybody relied on the IGI more than we should have, and we built up trees based on what we found in it. This is a tree I put together in 2006 for my father-in-law as part of his family tree. Looks impressive. Goes back to the early 18th century. But see John Toes, husband of Mary Reynolds and father of William Toes? I found an entry in the IGI for a likely baptism in 1794 and built the tree back, as you can see, based on that entry. But fast forward many years and find my past put images of Yorkshire records online. And I went and I found the burial for John Toes in 1794, aged just 1 day. He couldn't have been my husband's ancestor. I had to prune off a few branches of that tree. Turns out the John I was looking for was born in 1805 and was the illegitimate son of Mary Toes. By not killing off John at the beginning, I'd incorrectly added the Braveners and Shepherds to my tree, whereas in reality they were no relation to my husband or father-in-law. Therefore, I urge you to revisit parts of your tree where you don't have deaths for your ancestors and kill off any ancestors whose deaths or burials you haven't found. Worrying about one particular document. Now, some brick walls are caused because people are looking for a document that mightn't exist, but which they don't really need. We've all heard people who say they're stuck at their great-grandmother or great-great-grandfather or something similar. They bemoan the fact that they can't find this person's birth certificate. Depending on what country we're talking about, there might be a number of reasons for this, but it doesn't matter whether the certificate doesn't exist or it does, but just can't be found. What matters is why they want it. Is it to find a date of birth, a place of birth, names of parents? There's a good chance this information is available elsewhere. There are many places where you might find a date of birth, a baptism record, a death certificate, military attestation, a headstone, a family Bible, newspaper announcement, and there are others. A place of birth might be on a baptismal record, newspaper announcement, military attestation, marriage certificate, death certificate, census, and so on. One or both parents, again, might be on the baptismal record, or maybe even on the headstone. They might share a headstone. Might be in a newspaper announcement of the birth, or a marriage announcement in the newspaper, military attestations, and so on. You get the idea? It's the information you really need. It's not necessarily one particular document. Not recording source information. I shouldn't need to include this one, but I know that there are lots of people out there who are not doing this. Now, you all know that you should cite your sources, and you've heard often enough that it will help other people give them greater confidence in the family tree you have built, and that it will allow them to check your sources for themselves and double check your conclusions. But I know there are lots of people out there, and I've heard several people say this, who don't care, who think that they don't care about what other people think or letting other people check their work. But this isn't just about other people. What happens when some new information turns up about an ancestor that contradicts or doesn't fit with what the information you already have? What if it's an ancestor you haven't been working on for a while, so they're not fresh in your mind? People tell me that they know where their information came from, but sometimes I've been unsure about something and I've asked them where did they get that information, and they find they can't remember. Citing your sources will help you in the long run. And while it would always be ideal to cite them in perfect form for whatever style of citation you've chosen, it's better to potentially not get that completely correct and to have some elements not in the right order, but to at least have enough information so that you, and potentially somebody else, can go back to the source and check it out. Without this, you might end up with an 1851 census and an 1848 death record for the same person, as we saw in the beginning of this talk, and you won't be able to work out which one of these is correct and which one's an error. So I hope this talk has helped you realise some of the things that you may be doing wrong and that it has inspired you to correct them. Thank you. I'm Jenny Joyce.